Good morning to all of you. I am Dr. Neetu Gahlot. I am working as assistant professor in St. Andrews Institute of Technology and Management, Gurgaon. Today I am taking my 13th lecture, which is related to the carbohydrates. And in this lecture, uh, I want to discuss about the glucose, fructose, and the starch uh, from our second unit. So, So now my lecture is started from the glucose. As we know, the glucose is the example of the monosaccharides, and we know that the monosaccharides are the simplest carbohydrates which cannot be hydrolyzed, so smaller molecules. So that is the smallest unit of the carbohydrates. They contain 3 to 7 carbon atom, and there are about 20 monosaccharides which occur in nature. And here now we will discuss about the glucose. As we know that the glucose occur in the nature as the free as well as in the combined state. Okay, it occurs in the large quantities in rice grapes, so that it is called the grape sugar, and the honey, mango, peaches, and etc. are the other sources of the glucose. So here, when the sucrose is hydrolyzed by boiling with dilute hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid in alcohol solution. So an equimolar mixture of glucose and fructose is obtained. Here's the reaction. In this reaction, the sucrose C12H22O11, that is the sucrose, it is hydrolyzed and it gives the glucose, that is the C6H12O6, and the fructose also, it is the C6H12O6. Here we can see that the molecular formula of the glucose and fructose are the same, but but in the glucose and the fructose there are the major difference, which will be discussed uh, 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 early. So now, as we know that the molecular formula of the glucose is the C6H12O6, and here is the open chain structure of glucose here. And here we can see that the glucose in an example of the, it is called the aldohexose. Okay, so aldohexose, and it is also called the dextrose also. So it is the monomer of many polysaccharides such as that's like the starch, glycogen, cellulose, etc. So it is the probably the most abundant compound on the earth. It is here we can say that the open chain structure of the glucose, and this open chain structure is proposed by the um, um, Bayer, and it contains here the one aldehyde group and the primary alcohol, that is the CH2OH group, and the four secondary alcohol, these are the CHOH. So here we can say that this is the structure of the glucose. We can count that there are the 6 carbon is here, and at the first carbon here the aldehyde group is present, that is the CHO, second CHOH, uh, the third carbon again CHOH, fourth carbon again, fifth, and the last carbon, that is sixth carbon, here is the CH2OH. So so now we can again calculate the molecular formula. So we know that the molecular formula is the C6H12O6. Okay, so it may be noted here that in glucose, the OH group at the third carbon, that is chiral carbon. So we know that the chiral carbon means these are the carbon which has the all different groups attached to it. So this is the chiral carbon is oriented towards the left, while the remaining three OH groups at the C2, C4, and the C5, they are the chiral carbon atom are oriented towards the right side. So this is the structure of the glucose. And now come to the physical properties. So here we can see the physical properties of the glucose. According first is the appearance. So it is the colorless. It has a colorless solution and a white powder. And second is the crystallized from water solution. Then third is the it is easily soluble in water, acetic acid, and the blood and other solvents. Now the next is the optical activity. Optical activity means optically compound are those compounds which can turn the plane polarized light towards the right hand side or the left hand side. So here this is the D glucose or the L glucose. So these are the enantiomers and they are the optically active compound. So the optically active is dextrorotatory and the rotates the plane polarized light or PPL is clockwise. So this is optically active. And the now the melting point. Here the two forms are here. One is the alpha D glucose, that is the has the melting point is 146 degrees centigrade, and another is a beta D glucose. So the melting point of the beta D glucose is the 150 degrees centigrade. Now come to the chemical properties. So in the chemical properties, it oxidized to yield energy ATP. ATP means that is the adenosine triphosphate and water and the carbon dioxide broken to produce lipids and amino acid. So it is a main function. It is a chemical property. One, the second is the simple sugar, easily broken down by the body, regulated by the insulin in the blood. This is the chemical properties. Now we come to the function of glucose. So here we can see that it is the source of energy in the cell function, and the regulation of its metabolism in is of the great importance. So these are the function. Now here the structure of the glucose. It is the D glucose. If we take the mirror the D glucose in the front of the D glucose, then it show the L glucose, or the we can say that the D positive glucose or L negative glucose. So if they are the enantiomers, they are the enantiomers or they are called the optically active. So this is the uh, glucose. So here now come to the another topic, another carbohydrate and the part of the monosaccharide. It is the fructose. As we know that the molecular formula of fructose is the same as the glucose, it means that is the C6H12O6. It is also called the fruit sugar. So fructose also called the fruit sugar, and it is the most important of all the ketose. It occurs free along with glucose and sweet fruits, and hence the name is called the fruit sugar. And it is the combined state. In the combined state, it is present in the disaccharides and the polysaccharides. है ना? So we know that the what is the monosaccharides, disaccharides, and the polysaccharides. We have already discussed in our previous lecture, in which we have discussing the classification of the carbohydrate also. So now come to the structure of the fructose. So here we can see that the fructose are also the fruit sugar is the only naturally occurring ketohexose, and aldose is a carbohydrate that contain an aldehyde group and a keto group. The word is ketohexose. So here the one is the aldehyde group and another group is the keto group. So it is called fruit sugar, and the fructose along with glucose and galactose are three monosaccharides that are in the that are an important part of our diet. Here the chemical formula is the C6H12O6. We can represent the fructose here. This is the structure of the fructose. On the basis of the reaction, it has been established that the fructose contain a keto group at C2 carbon number 2, and the 6 carbon atoms are arranged in a straight chain as in the case of the glucose, and it belongs to the D series and the dextro series and the levo series. So we can represent it at the open chain structure also. Now In this structure, we can represent the fructose and the cyclic form or cyclic structure. So it is the fructose, and second one is the glucose. Now, when the fructose has the cyclic structure, it is we know that due to the presence of the keto group, it results in the formation of the intermediate hemiacetyl. In this arrangement, carbon number 5, here is the OH, combined with the ketonic group present in the second position. So here is a representation. It is a beta D fructokinase, and the convert is this. It is a meta rotation also. Now the properties of the fructose. We discuss the properties, so that as like the glucose, it is a white crystalline solid, and second, these carbohydrates are highly soluble when compared to the other sugar, and they absorb the moisture quickly and release it slowly into the environment with respect to sugar. So now the melting point of the fructose is the 146, and the uses of the fructose. So here are the some uses. It is used in the flavored water, energy drinks, and the low calories product, etc. And fruit sugar is used in the manufacturing of soft moist cookies, reduced calories product, etc. And the crystalline fructose, it is used in enhancing the taste in the food industries. So this is the fructose. I repeat again the fructose. We can see uh, in the classification of the carbohydrate, we know that the three types in the carbohydrates can be categorized into the three type parts. The first one is the monosaccharides, second is the disaccharides or oligosaccharides, and the third one is the polysaccharides. So glucose and fructose are the part of the monosaccharides. Okay, and we know that the monosaccharide means that is the smallest unit of the um, um, that is the smallest unit. So when we are discussing the glucose and the fructose, we know that the molecular formula and fructose are the C6H12O6, and it is the simplest carbohydrate, and it can't be hydrolyzed further. So we know that in the fructose there are the two groups are present. One is the uh, keto group and the aldehyde group also. Okay, so here also it is called the keto, and it is also called the fruit sugar. Fructose along with the glucose and the galactose are the three monosaccharides. These are the important part of our diet. So it is also called the ketohexose, you know, and keto or hexose group. So due to the presence of the keto group, actually the aldehyde group is present in the glucose. So in this fructose, there are the keto group is present. So it's a result in the formation of the intermolecular hemiacetyl, and here the difference, and now come to the properties of the fructose, and here is the uses of the fructose, and at the last we come to the starch. लाइट हो गया इसमें, चलिए स्टार्च means starch is the example of the polysaccharides. We know that the glucose and fructose are the example of the monosaccharides, and here the one other compound, that is the starch, and starch is the example of the polysaccharides. So here, first of all, we are discussing about the polysaccharides, as we discussed in our previous lecture, that the polysaccharides are formed when a large number of the monosaccharides molecule joined. So we know that when the monosaccharides are joined, or we can say these are the repeated units. So when the monosaccharides are joined together with the elimination of the water molecules, and the elimination of water molecules means that is the condensation reaction. So thus the polysaccharides may be regarded as the condensation polymer, in which the monosaccharides are joined together by the glucoside linkage. So we know that the important polysaccharides name are the important polysaccharides. So important polysaccharides are the starch, glucose, glycogen, dextrin. These are the important polysaccharides. So and the starch and the cellulose are the most important polysaccharides. in the above, these are the starch, cellulose, glycogen, and the dextrins. So in these polysaccharides, the starch and the cellulose are the most important polysaccharides. Now come to the starch. We know the molecular formula of the starch is the C6H10O5N. It is the molecular formula, and occurrence. So we know that the polysaccharides are the complex carbohydrates. They are made up the chain of the monosaccharides, or we can say the sugar, which are linked together by the glycoside and bonds, and which are formed by the condensation reaction. So the general formula of polysaccharides are the CXH2Y. In the starch, we know that the starch is the example of the homopolysaccharides, and we know that the polysaccharides are classified into homopolysaccharides or the heteropolysaccharides. So here the starch is the example of the homopolysaccharides, and starch occurrence out of starch, the value of the N in the molecular formula C6H10O5 and N. So N is the 20 to 100, sorry, 200 to 1000. These are various from the sources of from the sources to source. It is the chief food reserve material on or storage polysaccharides of the plant, and it found mainly in seeds, roots, etc. Wheat, maize, rice, potatoes, barley, banana, and these are the main sources of the starch. And starch occur in the form of the granule, and which vary in the shape and the size depending upon the plant sources. So this is the general description of the occurrence of the starch, and we know that a starch is a non-reducing saccharide, and it neither reduce the tolerance reagent. And here, um, it's and we know that the starch is the best example of the homopolysaccharides. Here, they are such polysaccharides which on hydrolysis yield a single type of the monosaccharides. Okay, so when all the monosaccharides in a polysaccharides are the same type, the polysaccharides is called the homopolysaccharides or the homoglycan. So these are the definition of the homopolysaccharides, and the composition of starch. The consist of the two polysaccharides components, water soluble amylose. It is a 15 to 20%, and the water insoluble amylopectin. It is 80 to 85%. In starch molecule, the alpha D glucopyranose unit are linked with each other through oxygen atoms at carbon atom number 4. So, as in case of maltose, the 23 glucose units linked to form starch. Here, here is the structure of the starch. We can see the structure. And now come to the physical properties. So right, the physical properties also, it is the white amorphous powder having no taste and no odor. And the second is the its granules consist of two polysaccharides unit, that is the amylase and the amylopectin, insoluble in water but swells up to form a gel in water. Now the chemical properties. The soluble starch give the blue color with iodine. We have when we doing the experiment in the lab, so we use the starch, and after the using the starch, the color of the solution will be starch with the give the blue color with the iodine. On heating starch at the 200 to 250 degrees centigrade, it is changed to dextrin having low molecular weight. So this is the chemical properties. Now come to the uses. So starch as the very important, and the main constituents of the food to produce heat. Second is the used as an adhesive in the book binding. Third is the paper industry for seizing paper, and then the manufacture of glucose, and the alcohol beverage. So these are the uses of starch. Now I want to come to the repeat of the our lecture here. In this lecture, we are known. In this lecture, after the lecture, we know that what are the glucose and what are the fructose and what are the starch also. So first of all, I I say that this topic is related to our previous topic, and in which topic there are the description of the carbohydrates, and according to our syllabus, and the carbohydrates we study the monosaccharides, disaccharides, and the polysaccharides also. So here the we are studying glucose, fructose, starch, cellulose, and the disaccharides also. Or so in this lecture we discussed the glucose, fructose, and the starch. So as we know, the first type of the carbohydrates is called the monosaccharides, and monosaccharides are the simplest carbohydrate and it can't be hydrolyzed further. So we know that the glucose is a very important source of the energy. So when mm, and we find the glucose from the honey, mangoes, peaches, and other sources of the other sources of are the glucose. Now when the sucrose is, we know that the sucrose is hydrolyzed. Sucrose means the molecular formula of sucrose is the C12H22O11, and after the hydrolysis it gives the it converts into the glucose and the fructose. And here the important point is that the molecular formula of the glucose and fructose are the same, but in the here's the difference between the functional group. In the now I explain that the glucose has the aldehyde functional group, and in the fructose there is a keto group important. So this is the main difference of the glucose and the fructose, but the molecular formula of the glucose and fructose are the same, that is the C6H12O6. Okay, then the open chain structure of the glucose is here. We can write the glucose as the open chain. So here we can count the C6 H12, and the oxygen is also 6, and here the arrangement, the carbon 3 is and carbon 3, here's the OH group is oriented towards the left side, while the remaining three OH groups at the C2, C4, C5 chiral compound, chiral carbon atom is oriented to the right side. So they are the physical properties of the glucose. And now come to the second, that is the uh, fructose. Here is the fructose. We know again, we repeat that the fructose is also the part of the monosaccharides. So this is the, and the, we know that the molecular formula of the fructose is the C6H12O6 again. And what is the difference between the glucose and the fructose? So in the glucose, and as I told that the glucose has the functional group is aldehyde group, and in the fructose there is the functional group is the keto group. So here now the structure, that is the ring cyclic structure of the fructose, and this is the cyclic structure of the glucose. Here, छोड़ गए, चलो. Now the fructose has the cyclic structure. So due to the presence of the keto group, it the result in the formation of the intermolecular hemiacetyl. So it is the arrangement, the C5OH combined with the ketonic group present in the second position. It is the properties of the fructose and the uses of the fructose also. And the last, at the last of the lecture, we have discussed the starch polysaccharides. Uh, we know the starch is the example of the polysaccharides, and and uh, in the polysaccharides, it is the complex polysaccharides are the complex carbohydrates that is made by the chain of the monosaccharides, that is the sugar, which are linked together by the glycoside. Here is the type of the homopolysaccharides, and then the composition of the starch. The starch consists of the two polysaccharides components that are the water soluble amylose 15 to 20%, and the water insoluble amylopectin, that is the 80 to 85%. In starch molecule, alpha D glycoprotease unit are linked with each other through oxygen atom at carbon atom number 4. So this is the structure and the chemical properties and the physical properties also. At the last, we have the uses of the starch also. So these are the some short introduction of the glucose, fructose, and the starch. And in our next lecture, we are going to discuss about the cellulose and the polysaccharides. Disaccharides. So in our previous and our next lecture, we are discussing about the cellulose and the disaccharides also. So these are the parts of the carbohydrate. And if you have the doubt, so contact with me. Now I want to stop my lecture.